So here's one of the equations. Which group had the reciprocal graph? That was your group? So here's our reciprocal graph. You're taking your reciprocal graph and you're moving it 3 to the left and 2 up. All we have to do is write the equation of the image graph. So one way of doing it is to go directly to the equation. The other way to do it is to start with function notation and then use your function notation to think about it further. So I'll split the page here. If you wanted to go to it directly, in order to move it 3 to the left, it's going to have to happen inside the function. Anything that's happening inside the function is happening where the x was. So if the x is in the bottom, as it is in a reciprocal graph, well, if I need to move 3 to the left, I'm going to have, instead of just an x on the bottom, I'm going to have an x plus 3. Because that's where the x was. That's inside my function. Then, in order to translate it 2 units up, that's outside of my function. That's going to happen right there. So we can go to the answer for this one right away. Sometimes, depending on the graph, it's hard to see that directly. Especially, I think the reciprocal one is sometimes a little bit harder than some of the other ones because it's not like inside of a square root or inside of something squared. So some people like to start with function notation. If you're going to go to function notation, f of x is just another way of writing y. So if we started with y equals 1 over x, we could have written our function f of x is 1 over x. That means the same thing. In function notation, when we want to show a transformation of 3 units to the left and 2 units up, it's easy to write because we can really see what's inside and what's outside. So if I want 3 to the left, that'll be x plus 3, just y equals. And 2 up would be plus 2 afterwards. Yes? Not yet. I'm just doing function notation. Okay? So this is saying in function notation, I've got an x plus 3 inside my function. That's really easy to see here. And then plus 2 is outside of my function. Now, if I want to change this from function notation back into this notation on the right that on the left that we have in green, what does this mean? Well, what does f of x plus 3 mean? It means that we take our function f of x and we replace the x with an x plus 3. So how would I write that? I would write that as 1 over, and instead of the x, I would have x plus 3. And then outside of my function, I still have a plus 2. So we can either do this one directly like we did to start with, and say if you can recognize where the x was and think that's my inside of my function, and where is outside of my function, you could go to writing your equation right away. If you have trouble seeing it, you could start in function notation, because it's easy to see what goes inside and what goes outside, and then we're converting our function notation to our actual equation here. Because what function notation says, well, if I started my function was 1 over x, if I have f of x plus 3, then wherever I had an x in my original equation, I now have to replace it with an x plus 3. (12, 13, 14, and 15).